Welcome to Middle Fingers Up. I'm your host, Kieran. And today we're talking about, and I know this word is getting used a lot, and I'm kind of getting sick of it too, but I'm going to go with it. We're talking about healing over this concept of harmony, which we'll get into. And the question really is why is it that a lot of the BIPOC adults around us, including my guest and I, why are we starting to have conversations our families never knew how to have? Where's that coming from? And how do we make sense of it? And before we kind of get into it, before I bring our guest on, I do want to start by naming something important. I just want to remind all of us, we have really cool conversations here on this platform. I'm very grateful for them. I'm grateful for the people like my guests that come on and want to push that envelope, want to go there. But I also want to be mindful that these hard, rough, raw, whatever you want to call it, conversations, they're not about bringing a certain community down. They're not about bringing our elders, our caregivers, our parents, the people in our villages. It's not about dismissing their sacrifices, the work they've done, the love that we have for each other. And I also want to name that it's important to hold on to this thought that I just shared with you, because I promise you, it's going to come up. You're going to push up against it as you're following through this conversation with my guest and I. So just remember, we're not putting anyone down when we're starting to get curious about, why are we having these kinds of conversations? We talk a lot about breaking cycles, another buzz phrase. And I think we don't really ask often enough when we talk about breaking cycles, like, what does that actually mean? What would it look like in real life if I was truly unpacking and breaking a cycle? How do I know I'm in a cycle that needs to be broken? And my guest and I are going to sort of talk about that today. It's not just about noticing why things didn't work as we grew up or in our relationships, whether we're parents, whether we're in a career, whether we're in a marriage, wherever it is in our life. It's also about starting new patterns too. So we talk about breaking cycles, but then what do we do? Like, we break something. So how do we move forward? How do we start new patterns? What's a healthy pattern to start? And I think all of that is really about allowing ourselves to be honest. A while back, I did a gup shop about where I shared that we can feel multiple feelings at once. Like, we can be grateful. We can be grateful for what our parents, especially our immigrant parents, have done for us. But we can also name some other feelings that come along with that gratitude, like for many of us, guilt and shame. So it's okay to have two things going on once. You can be happy, but you can also be a little sad and upset too. And I think a lot of the time, the people that we're closest to, like our parents, our family, our siblings, some of these people that we've grown up with or we're in a community with may not have necessarily learned how to crack themselves open and unpack stuff. And what ends up happening, I think, is that when you're in a learning journey and the people around you aren't necessarily there, you kind of start to do it alone. You kind of feel a little isolated because you know you can't go backwards, but you also don't know how to bring some of these folks forward because they don't have the capacity to, they don't understand, they don't care to. There's all these kinds of reasons why some people are a little further ahead in a learning journey than others. And there's, again, no shame, no shade there. It's just my guest and I want to, recognize that sometimes it's lonely doing some of this true brave work of like asking those tough questions and going there. And I think that's why a lot of time not much gets said, because we don't want to disrupt our family. We don't want to disrupt our community. And look, that's okay. You do you. But my guest and I, what we want to say today is like what matters most is acknowledging like how you are as an individual, and being honest with yourself and giving yourself the permission to grow, even if no one else around you cares to, wants to, or even recognizes it. Like, do this for yourself. We come to this world for a short period of time, and it's okay if others aren't agreeing with some of the good work that we're doing. This isn't personal. It's relational. It's about how our family stories are sometimes silenced, and how expectations then later show up when these things are silenced in parts of our bodies, our marriages, our relationships, even when we parent, especially when we parent. And I think that's where my guest and I want to start breaking some of these cycles and start helping us build new patterns when we are in this parenting journey, because that's what it's about, leaving the next generation with some resources and skills that maybe some of us didn't have. And I do think that this is a generation, those of us who are in the same timeline as me, we're the first ones that are doing a lot of what's called unlearning. A lot of times people are surviving, they're going along with something. It's only really in the last little while that a lot of us are like, hold on, maybe those things that we were taught or weren't taught are impacting us. And I think it's so cool for those of us that are willing to go there and talk about it and be curious about that. So today we're choosing to heal over being in this harmonious state with our loved ones, especially for the BIPOC community. I think those adults that have parents and caregivers, and they're deeply, deeply tied to those parents, they don't feel like they have the space to process and are quietly paying the price. So we're going to explore how we can carry these stories and how we can do the work for ourselves and how we can start new ways of being. So part of this thing, before I bring our guest in, is also understanding that a lot of times in our communities, the feel that's really supported and wanted is to be happy and fulfilled. And in order for us to accomplish moments of happiness and fulfillment, we also have to feel all the other emotions, sadness, grief, anger, because you need to know what those are like in order to know what happiness is like. So when we suppress those other feelings outside of happiness, they just keep showing up in other ways, in our body, in the way that we speak, in the way that we hold on to things. And so they don't really go away. So just keep that in mind as we have this conversation today. Okay, so I'm super excited to reintroduce a guest that we had not too long ago, Kam Bassier. Many of you will know Kam from his episode 136, You're Not Lazy, You're Burnt Out. In that episode, we talked about survival mode. We talked about what burnout can look like, what happens when people are expected to keep functioning without support, particularly what happens to our nervous system when we are not regulated, and what does it mean to be regulated? Who's responsible to keep us regulated? Kam shared a lot of good information in that one, and so we're back to build off of that episode. Recently, Kam posted a video that received some interesting feedback. And I think in our world, mine and Kam's world, when we get feedback, so there's like dead silence and we get no feedback, no likes in our insights show, no one's really cared for this video. Usually that feedback means we got to keep having this conversation. People are not sure what to do with this information. And then there's that other kind of feedback where your messages and your comments are blowing up and people have all sorts of stuff to say. And that's what happened when Kam posted this video of his, which we're going to get into and talk about. So, Kam, welcome. Finally. I know I said a lot. How we doing, bro?
Oh my gosh, I was listening to you. I'm like, everything you just said is like its own little mini podcast right there. You just framed that up so perfectly, from how we were feeling, and I really appreciate you saying that this is not about bringing anyone down or calling anyone out. We are all just trying to figure things out and find a space where we could all heal and be happy and just make sense of what happened and just move on peacefully. So I really appreciate you saying that. Everything you just said is I hope you take that soundbite alone and make it into your own video, because that was awesome. But thank you for having me on again. And interesting, as you just said, the last time I was on, we spoke about nervous system regulation and how interesting and ironic that this is going to tie into a lot to what we're talking about, because the older generation, our parents and our aunts and uncles, well, they didn't even, we are just learning what the term nervous system regulation is. And now we can look back, and again, not a reason, not an excuse, not a pass, but a lot of our older generation were born, raised, and still continue to exist with dysregulated nervous systems, which is a source for a lot of the issues that we're going to talk about and a lot of the behaviors and patterns that were passed down. So I didn't even think about that, but like that's an interesting thread that's going to be sort of continuous as we continue to talk. So yeah, I'm really excited to get into it.
Yeah, well said. So, okay, then let's get into it. Let's start at this video you posted. I think you can talk about the video, but where I'd like to start with you is I'm very curious, like what was going on in your world for you to talk about the topic that you did that, you know, kind of motivated you to want to put that kind of a video out?
Yeah, so I was speaking with a really close friend of mine, a childhood friend of mine, and she's married with kids, same Guyanese, West Indian background. We have parallel lives in that we both moved to North America in our early 20s. I was at 18 and she was in her early 20s, built her life, started her families, but obviously still had the same dynamic with pressure from the parents and her in-laws and whatnot. And she shared with me last summer the situation between her husband and his father and his family. And again, tons of patterns are going to come out. But one such is that sometimes there is a very strong parental figure, the one who commands respect, and everyone's sort of like, he's the default leader, and all the others, so the aunts and the uncles, they all sort of defer to him as the leader. The issue comes up when that default leader has traits of narcissism, or has toxic traits and is emotionally abusive or neglectful. And my friend's husband made the decision to sort of create distance from his dad. Mm-hmm. And then what happened is the other family members came around and they hit him with the, how can you do this? He's your father. You don't know how much time he has left. Let the past be in the past. All the while, though, from my understanding, the fathers are not willing to acknowledge anything, not willing to acknowledge or even have a conversation about how he would have made his kids feel all these years. And so he kind of stuck to his guns. And his wife, my friend, was sharing with me privately that obviously he's struggling with that, right? Is this the right decision? He's our age and he's trying to protect his own family, his kids, right? And in the conversations, it turned out that the grandchildren, who are also grown up, don't appreciate the grandfather. And they don't like the way he speaks, and they don't like the way he interacts, and they support fully. But it just, even though we know intellectually that we're doing the right thing, we're protecting our peace, we're doing what we feel is best and not putting ourselves in position to expose ourselves to more hurt, as a child, you can't help but feel like you're always going to second guess your decision. And so when I heard that, and with my own experience with my own family and whatnot, not to that extent, I felt compelled to just put it out there, more like a question, to say, is it really the child's responsibility to make peace? And I use the example, so it's not that his dad is on his deathbed, but we've heard stories before of them getting up in age, and they really want to just like, we want to give them the grace of like, hey, you were not perfect, but you did the best you could, and it's all good. And a lot of us can't do that. And that's the question, is like, how much of their responsibility is on us? Why is the responsibility on us? And so that was the first video, and it went off. And to your point, I did not expect that feedback or the reception, but the fact that it got such a big reception Like really, it's tens of thousands of people saying, finally, this is how I feel. Someone's saying it. This is exactly how I feel. People were making little cheeky comments like, how can I send this to my mom? How can I send this to my dad or whatnot? And this video still, to this day, a few hours ago, I'm still getting comments and feedback from that video. And at first, I felt like, okay, I did a good thing here. Like I acted as a voice for so many people who were feeling this way and are feeling validated.
Mm-hmm.
But here's where it got a little tricky. In a lot of cases, people were saying, this is why I went no contact with my family.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I went no contact with my mother or father. And obviously situations differ from person to person. But I did not want that to be the last message. This wasn't me telling anyone, hey, cut them out. They're no good for you. That's not what we want.
Yeah.
That's not how we want to leave things. And so I made a follow-up video, just sort of acknowledging that video and proposed, and we can get into it. I proposed, okay, I know forgiveness is hard. It's hard for anyone. But what about acceptance? What about accepting? And, it is the message is nuanced, and you have to be at a certain place in your own individual healing to really hear what's being said, which is you might not get the closure and you might not get the acknowledgement. But if you do the work, if you dig deep enough, you can find the blessings within that experience. You can see that you are now the parent you needed, all the things that you lacked growing up. And so I left it at that. And that also went fairly viral because it gave people something to hold on to and say, yeah, okay, yes, I can see how it affected me in a positive way. And so I think this is where we are right now, and where I am in my life journey and in the work that I do. And then also I'm having a conversation with a very, very close family member. And off screen just now, we spoke about like our relationship with our own kids, and we're at it now where our kids are growing up and entering teens and adulthood. And with this very close family member of mine, they have a child who is an adult, and we're going through the same things. And I'm surprised because I thought that this family member, that we would be more aligned in the way we see things. But I'm now really listening to the child who's grown up, and we're having conversations. And now I'm like, well, okay, I can see plainly now that even if we intellectually know what's wrong and how we need to change, it's really, really hard. And I do think a big part of it plays into nervous system dysregulation and being stuck in survival mode, knowing that we need to do better, but just not being able to. And so right now, where I feel like we need to start forging a path forward is, yes, everything that happened is messed up. And yes, I'm happy for us. I'm like, let's get into it and let's label what's happening. But we really won't feel good until we find a path forward. Like, okay, now what? What do we do? And as you said off screen, what does healing actually look like? What does acceptance actually look like? What are the tactical moves that we need to make so that we can really integrate what happened, accept it, and then move on? And then, as you said, form new cycles with our children now, because we're in our 40s and our children are, I have nieces and nephews that are university age and starting their careers. So the ship has sailed. Like we need to get on it because we have adult children in the fold. So it's even more incumbent upon us to accelerate our healing, so to speak.
Yeah. And like, even if we're accelerating it, or even building a level of awareness and acknowledging that this feeling, this vibe might show up from time to time. And then I know how to name it, and I know how to care for and really a lot of it that I hear is caring for the little your inner child work, as we hear a lot about. And these are things that we didn't get. So it's like, in plain language, parents are knowing something's happened, but refusing or unable to acknowledge how it's affected you or affected you while you were a child. And it's rough because it's like the event is known or the situation is known, the impact is dismissed, and there's no emotional responsibility that's taken. So whether it was you as a child or as an adult going back and thinking about that, you kind of have to take that emotional responsibility on yourself. And you can't make your parents, you can't make your caregivers get it. My kids also won't be able to do that with me, but I'm hoping that I'll have a level of awareness where I can say, okay, I need to like listen or hear you out. And I don't know, and I don't mean to be like a negative Nancy, but I just don't know if some of us are going to get that from that elder generation. And we'll talk about that in a second. Some of that comes from them living in that survival, high stress mode. And so we'll get into that in a minute. So it really does become our own responsibility to work through some of that. And I think knowing that you're not doing it alone, like when you had that many people responding, I think if anything, it's like there is a community of people that are sharing similar experiences. And that's a bit of a relief to not feel like you had to go through it alone or what, but knowing okay, other people are also experiencing that. So we do have, maybe it's not our parents, but we do have other people that we can go to say, oh yeah, this thing happened to you too, me too. How are you working through this? Here's how I'm working through it, or here's where I'm stuck. And so if we want to move forward, we do have to go backwards a little bit and address some of these things. And I think to get unstuck or figure out. And so I think one of the things I'm curious about is adult children realizing that they had to emotionally grow up alone, so do that emotional labor on their own. So in your comments, did you get any kind of feedback about people realizing these things, and did they say anything or any feedback you have and having had these sort of conversations about where do you go when you start to realize I kind of have to manage this on my own?
Exactly. Yeah, quite a few people in the comments said, I had to be my own parent. I had to figure it out on my own. I think the one that struck me were when people said, my mother or my father didn't realize that they were preparing me how to be on my own. They were preparing me how to live without them. Because I guess it came to a point where they realized that this is not going anywhere. I'm not going to be heard. Every time I try, I'm met with resistance. And so I have to be my own cheerleader. I have to be my own therapist. I have to become an individual who can stand on their own 2 feet and train myself not to rely on my parents. What's interesting in private conversations, the parents in question would often look at the adult child and see them have a good job and a great relationship with their kids, and they're doing well. And they say, well, look, we did that. That was our work. Like, we pushed you. So I don't think they're trying to make it up, but I think subconsciously there is an underlying guilt about how they did things. And so seeing the child grow up and live a good life, it does allow them to sort of reframe the story and say, okay, I wasn't that bad. Like, look at how wonderfully you turned out. I wasn't that bad. But they're not they're not realizing that those kids turned out great in spite of them. Now, I don't want to just say it's that, because you and I spoke about it too. I do believe that there are blessings in conflict. There are lessons to be had. And I, in my own personal experience, the strained relationship between me and my dad is one of the catalysts for me to be I call myself a pretty good dad to my kids, because I remember, I know so intimately what I lacked, what I needed. And now someone could counter and say, well, if you grew up with 2 loving parents, then they would have modeled that behavior to you. And it would probably work out the same, where you would be able to model this behavior and relationship the same way your loving parents would have done. But I'm not so sure about that, because one thing so I've been like ranting on social media for years, and I always laugh at myself because, Kieran, I've put out 3 or 4 major pieces about my dad and how he was this and he was that, whatever. All the while, never once saying anything about my mom. And my mom is the most amazing mother. She's loving, she's kind, she's patient. She is like, in fact, the older I get, even I feel a bit of guilt for not appreciating her for all these years. Because I'm like, man, like when I hear the relationships that other friends have with their moms, I'm like, man, like my mom is
She's a
a
saint.
saint. And to this day, we have a great relationship. But my point is, we know psychologically we are more impacted by a negative experience than we are a positive experience. And so that dynamic between my dad and I has sat with me for so long that it's become a part of my identity. Is like everything I did, my dad, this and this and this, and I'm a good parent because of all the things my dad didn't do. And I think that does have some teeth to it, because I in a big way, I sort of took my mother's love for granted because it was there. It was so easy and it was so effortless. And I don't, and maybe I should, but I don't credit my mom as much as I do my dad and that strained relationship for what we have. So I think when other parents say, oh, well, you turned out that way, I know there's an underlying guilt there. And we know that it's not because of them, that's in spite of them. But this is where we are. We're trying to, again, not play the blame game. But yeah, in the comments, yeah, kids, and especially now that they have kids, now there's another reason for keeping distance, which is, one, I have to protect myself, but two, I have to protect my children.
Yeah.
And I don't want my children to be around someone who would undermine me. So yeah, no,
that's a rough one. But I do like, I hear what you're saying about, and really good point about focusing on what you didn't get, you were lacking through your dad. And it's never too late to give credit where credit's due. So good for you to start to recognize that about your mom. And I'm sure that's going to impact how you two have your relationship moving forward. I think the theme too, though, here is like, more than one thing can happen. So even when parents look at their kids as adults and say, okay, but you turned out fine. Yeah. And it could be in spite. It could be part because there was a village surrounding them. It could be because the parents did do good as well. It's just that sometimes we get so caught in feeling guilty about the crappy parts because we don't want to acknowledge that. And then we focus on the good. Yeah, sure, I did turn out good, but that doesn't mean that these other shitty things didn't happen. And why do I want to go and address those shitty things when everything's going fine is likely because those things are impacting me and getting in the way, even though, quote unquote, I turned out fine. And I think people have a hard time because totally, yeah, you're great. Your kids are going to a fine ass university. They're smart ass kids. You know, they have a good job, all those things. But again, these are all external conditional things. And many of us have been taught by that too. You're doing, you're showing success because you drive the car, you got the job, you went to get your education, which is great because they want to break the cycle of survival. They don't want us to be in that place. So you're like, that's great. But then when you're growing up in the Western world, there's all those other complex existential, I can't never say that word, but all that other stuff that comes along with who am I and whatnot that we see other kids, we see in pop culture, we see in all these sorts of ways of people growing up with that we also are questioning. And so that's where some, things that we feel we didn't get, like that emotional support or whatnot. So I think, yeah, sure, you can have turned out well, but you can also be going backwards and saying, but then these things also happen that are impacting me. And it's not one or the other. It's multiple things, going. My kids will likely share as they get older with their therapist when they're complaining about me, the things that I didn't deliver or the things that I wanted and they didn't. And hopefully there's a balance of some good things I did too. But of course, there's going to be lots of things that we as caregivers are going to like suck at. So I do want to keep going back to, you can still talk about the shitty stuff too, because that's likely unfinished business in actually, some kind of ways.
There's a going joke, and I think, I have to acknowledge as I say this, that I do have some old like West Indian immigrant traits as well, because you talked about when your kids go talk to their therapist. So my kids now, when my son, like a while back, he was like, "What? There's no goat butter, right? Because you have regular butter in the house." I'm like, just add that to the list that you talk to your therapist about, of how like argue for not having goat butter in the house. Right? But it is true. Actually, I'm curious to get your thoughts, because as I was getting ready for this conversation, interesting points came up, and we know from, like, especially from the West Indian community, we are taught about the family first and the group
Yes.
first, and then
Yeah.
we move to the Western world, and it's really about the individual.
Yes. Yeah.
And so a lot of times this concept creeps into the conflict between the child. Like, now I grew up in both worlds, so I understand where they're coming from. But if you're born and raised in North America, all you have is the individualistic side of it. But
Yeah.
it creeps into conversations where you'll get the older generation saying, "You're too Canadian, you're too American, all these things about me, right? What about me?" But the reality is, in our day, we had to care about everyone. We had to focus on the family. Like, we had to put ourselves second, and
Yeah.
that was how we were able to survive. And it's a lot of times they're counter to say, "You're only focused on yourself. That's your problem." Right?
Yeah.
Your life's so good because you have all your needs met. You have this nice house and your clothes, and we're paying for your school, that you have the luxury of dealing with this. But the reality is, we didn't.
Yeah.
But in our space, we're sort of code switching between two systems.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we're in, right? So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on it.
I think you made a really good point, and I think that's absolutely accurate. Is we do live in a Western society where there is a lot of quote unquote selfishness, to be selfish, to be an individual. Look, the fact that you and I can sit here and have this reflection period goes to show how much we've evolved from our parents' time. So kudos to them, because they're right. They had to survive. And I think that thinking of how hard they had to sacrifice and survive is what gets in the way for a lot of us to address some of the bad dynamics that did happen in our homes and in our communities, because we're torn. And I think as I was preparing, I was refreshing my work mental health brain, and I started to do some reading, and I thought, oh, this will be fitting, because it's like this collective prioritization. So collectivism is, explains sometimes why guilt is heavy, because we're socialized to prioritize family and community comfort over individual feelings, as you said. And so great parts to this, obviously, like we are grateful for being part of a collective community. I think we're very blessed. But then there's also this price you have to pay as well with in being in this collective sort of mentality. And so it's almost like there's this concept called the harmony concept. And I was kind of saying this to you too, is what you touched on your video in the comments you got about this family friend that you were talking about and kind of their experience. It's not just that. It's very cultural. And in many of our BIPOC communities, harmony isn't like just a value. It's, as you said, it's a survival strategy that has been passed down through generations. So families often prioritize keeping the group together over individual feelings. So it doesn't matter what I think today or what you think, but we all have to be together. And some of it, again, was literally survival from years and years and years ago. A group of you out in the wilderness versus one of you, better to have more of you. And so it's sometimes then gets translated about protecting the family story and the secrets, the reputation, and then all of that takes the lead. How can it not? And then we end up avoiding conflict that kind of ripples outwards. And so from being in a collective community, which is very big picture, it sounds lovely. It's great to be part of that. But then our generation is doing that unlearning for the first time. And we're like balancing growing up in this Western world where it is okay to also think of you. So I have to think of me, but I also think I have to think of this micro macro level of thinking. And I think this is where avoiding disagreements, even when someone is hurt. This is what happens. We can't just name at a family dinner, that was offensive. My feelings were hurt. It turns into something big because we're all connected. So we're feeling all the feels. And then it's like what you said, well, we did all these things for you. And it's like, yeah, like no one is saying you didn't do these things. And maybe we need to do a better job as our generation appreciating that if our parents are saying that. But also what ends up happening is they're not taking responsibility for some of the shitty things they've done. And we are growing up taking their responsibility. And something you and I are learning as parents is it is not our child's job to take any responsibility of the adult. So it is an adult's expectation to provide basic needs too. So you know what I mean? Like, yeah, thank you. I get it. It was survival, but you did have kids, and it is an expectation as a parent to give basic needs to your child. And never should a child feel up against that. Never should a child ever have to feel like, yeah, you're right. You gave me this house. You worked for me. You gave me this food. And that's how a lot of it is translated to us. So then we feel fucking guilty all day long.
Yes,
You gave me all these things. You worked so hard, but
that's the ace. That's the ace of the sleeve. Is like we're not allowed to question the faults or anything that bad had happened.
Yeah.
Because they made the ultimate sacrifice for us.
Yeah. So how can you compete against that? It's like a God complex. Like, how can any of our emotional feelings, getting bullied at school, getting sexually abused by the family member, being abused in other ways, whatever our individual stories are, how can any of that compare to this above, I did all these things to put you here? And you're like, yeah, like, you're right, you did. But you also chose to have me here. And now you also have to learn how to be responsible as a parent and say, okay, that bad thing happened to you and I couldn't provide that for you or what. So I think sometimes we just supplement and we excuse a lot of it. And then that's fine if we want to do that. But what you and I are talking about today is it's coming out in other ways.
Yes.
Where our body is showing us signs. We're not sleeping well. We're having health issues. Our marriages are falling apart because a husband or a wife might bring that relationship between their parents into their relationship. Like our kids are separate. So there's all these other things because we're not in survival mode anymore. Like you and I aren't in survival mode. Sure, we have rough months where maybe we can't pay bills, but we're not surviving anymore. And so we don't have to feel guilty for that either. So I think this harmony concept, it softens the edges and it makes us always go back. Like we romanticize the past. We look at pictures and we think, oh, that family trip where 30 of us all drove to California was amazing. And it's like, sure, that was amazing, but maybe bad things happened on the way there. Maybe bad things were happening alongside of that. Maybe that trip was really good and exciting, but because other bad things were happening, children couldn't enjoy themselves and mothers felt like, so
yeah. How many people get to say that we went to California? You do.
Yeah, right. And you're like, absolutely, I do. You know, totally. But again, I had these other experiences here too. And I was talking to a friend a few months ago. Her uncle passed away and her cousin, he's had an interesting relationship with his dad. His dad had a really hard life and used substances on and off quite a bit. And as his dad is passing away in the hospital, he's saying the things he's saying to say his goodbyes. And after he passed, my friend and I were talking, she's like, my cousin was really hurt. Like, he thought maybe this was the time he was going to get the apology from his dad for not showing up in the ways that he should have shown up. And so we talked about, like sometimes we're not going to get the apology, as you were saying. So then the acceptance piece is how do I learn from that hard life experience and then put it towards my own children or my own life of like, I value apologies. It's important to me to take responsibility and apologize to people. So it's like, that's how values get formed sometimes when we didn't get the things. And so instead of sitting in one corner and complaining like, oh, these people never apologize, we can't control that. But can I then say that's important to me, and now I'm going to give that to others, and maybe your little you will get what you didn't get from your father. It's what you're saying. Like, we do have to some point start to own our story, and we have to say, okay, that was crappy, and I know it's bothered me all my life, but then what can I do about it? Instead of making every decision out of guilt or whatnot, because our parents sacrificed for us.
Absolutely. That's there's the effect on our nervous system in present day that's manifesting. But I want to stay here for a little bit because it's really important. Ever since I posted that video, I've had even older men come out and we talk about it. And I remember specifically I was having a conversation with a friend at the gym, and I think he's in his early 60s and he's retired and he's Guyanese. And let's use the family gathering as an example. You brought that up perfectly. And when you're there now as the self-aware adult, and you're now coming in with this level of self-awareness, and you understand the dynamic of these social gatherings. And we had a conversation about what healing would look like to the villager in Guyana, the guy who lives in the country, right? The West Indian. And, the first thing we both had to admit is that, as you said it, and you're right, Karen, but oftentimes there's a disconnect in even education level, right? And emotional intelligence and awareness. And it doesn't mean that the older generation is incapable or doesn't want to hear it, but sometimes the academic modalities simply doesn't carry over. Mm-hmm. And so then my question to him was like, all right, so then how do we heal? How do we know we're making peace? And we both sort of share stories. And this is more of a male thing. Where you'll get into a dust up with a friend and you're like going, and then you argue or you throw punches or whatever it is. And then there's the distance. And then you want to make peace. But again, we don't have the words. We don't have the terminology. We can't really label how we're feeling. But we know we don't want this distance anymore. And what often ends up happening is you bump into each other, right? And actually, so my friend said something interesting. Instead of one of us going, man, listen, I'm sorry about how things went down. It's been too long. They'll actually crack a joke and say, oh, this guy, like, he doesn't like me anymore. He sees me. He doesn't even call me. He doesn't even reach out to me. They haven't spoken in 10 years, right? But that's how we break the ice. Or use the family gathering as an example. Sometimes healing could look like you actually agree to just break bread together. And you sit and there's no conversation. But the conversation is, I am willing to be in a space with you again. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk, and maybe, and I know this is going to get sticky because our generation, we don't like small talk. Feel the small talk is a dismissal, right? Or like an invalidation of what's really going on. Like, we have stuff to talk about, but we're talking about the recipes and the menu and the weather and who got a job, but there's this elephant in the room. And I'm trying to find the space now because I can acknowledge that sometimes that is the doorway to healing, where it's just being able to sit together and have small talk. And then in that moment, you'll begin to remember why you were close. You'll begin to remember, like, and I'm talking more of like adult dynamic, not necessarily child parent. But I think it's important to bring this up because I know there are people of the older generation that want to heal, but this idea of dialogue, of sitting and just like really articulating our feelings, it's not going to happen. Yeah, not because they don't want to, because it's just not something that comes naturally to them. Yeah. So I am so open right now to like, okay, what could be a safer space? And then the second part to what you're saying is, even if you don't get it, even if you don't get the validation, so you don't get the validation, they don't admit the fault, where does that leave you? Yeah. Right? And how do you move forward? And it might be that the whole dynamic of just agreeing to share the space together and not, because here's the other thing, and I'm learning as I get older now, that our generation, the older generation, does pay attention, hold things in, are aware of it, but they're not articulating it. So
Yeah.
if you're the child that's always saying, I need you to acknowledge this, and you did this, and you did this, and you did this, they are feeling guilt. They are feeling ashamed. But because of their conditioning, because of all the things that we know and we don't know about their past and upbringing. And of course, we know for a fact that the older generation, rule number one, don't talk about your problems.
Yeah.
Everybody got problems.
Just be
Your
happy.
problems are not bigger than anyone
Yeah.
else's problems. And
Yeah.
I don't think, and I think to some extent, in certain situations, actually to some extent, we can adapt some of that in a healthy way, because sometimes we just go overboard with the verbal diarrhea and just be like, oh, everything,
Processing. Yeah.
processing, right? So I think where we are right now is, it would almost for me make sense to go in not expecting the acknowledgement. I think there are two types of the older generation. The ones that are willing to say, I messed up. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. Like, my mom had her first child at 19, right? We didn't know what we were doing. My uncle moved from Guyana, 30 degrees, to Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Oh my God.
He always tells the story of him riding a bicycle down the street with his wife in tow in
Oh my
minus
gosh.
15 temperature. And I'm like, that has to count for something,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah. Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
and I know he's on his own healing journey now, and he's got 4 beautiful children, and he's got grandkids, and we talk all the time, and I can see a man who has regret.
Yeah.
I can see a man who has regret, but one of his sons is a doctor, and he'll say, look, and him and his wife, they were janitors for 20 plus years, working 3 a.m. shifts. And so I'm like, that has to count for something.
Yeah.
And even if he can't acknowledge or articulate himself in that way, he will be the type of person that says, I know I messed up, and I'm here now. Can we move forward? And I think for a lot of us, that would be enough.
Yeah,
That would be
totally. Absolutely. And
right.
then seeing some kind of change. But again, as we've said, it may also not happen. And whether our caregivers, our parents, or those that raised us are feeling it and aren't sharing it, don't know how, like you said, there's all these different, we can't assume. We can't sit from our position and say, well, it's because they just don't want to. There's lots of complicating factors. But that also then means that going back to, and I know it's repetitive, but sometimes you have to say it over and over, is okay. Like, if it's impacting me that I don't have that closure and it's unfinished business between me and my dad, or me and my mom, me and my grandma, whoever it is, then that is worth working through. It just might mean it may not be with that other person, because they may not be able to meet us where we're at. And
Yes.
at some point, as adults who are trying to grow up with some kind of level-headedness, you start to figure out how to do it on your own. I think where the struggle is not acknowledging it, and it's impacting your own relationships. Because you grew up in a home where no one talked about anything ever and everything was conflict avoidant, it's quite possible that is showing up in not healthy ways between you and your current partner, you and where you work, you and your children, and so on and so on. So it's like, for those reasons, it is worth evolving. Fine, they didn't have the ability to do it, but we do. And you said this last time when we talked in the last episode. We have these resources. We have all of this knowledge. And on one hand, that's great. I think on the other hand, though, it's like we also have a lot of rationale for why our elders didn't do what they didn't do or did what they did too, right? Like, we're like, oh, intergenerational trauma and all these things. So then it's like, don't forget, you do have to also look after you as well. Good to have that, what they didn't know, they weren't able to do. But if it's still impacting us, because we also have to sleep, we also have to manage our cortisol, we also don't want to pass on to the next generational abundance of these health issues as well, right? So like, it's still worth working through. You just may not have the people that you wish you could have gotten an apology or what. And sometimes you get the apology and you're like, no, this isn't even helpful. You waited all your life for
100%.
something and then it happens and you're like, this isn't even what I wanted. I don't even know what I want anymore because I've lived all these years with guilt or whatever it is. So it's worth just working through it in whatever capacity we can.
It's actually a great segue. It's that you're right. Whether you get the apology or not, you don't know for sure that that's going to be the big breakthrough that you need. But what's more important is now, as an adult, being able to identify how that dynamic has shaped you as an individual and looking at your signs. So, coming back to nervous system regulation, maybe you're noticing that you're always scanning the temperature of the room, like whose moods, and tiptoeing around people. You're hyper vigilant around people. Or maybe you're the type of person that would fawn, right? You're always people pleasing because you don't want to upset anyone, right? You're always trying to keep the peace. Or even emotional suppression. Not only have you been taught to not say and not complain, but it's modeled to you, right? Because your parents won't share, so you learn not to share. And so you can start looking at all the little symptoms that's affecting your nervous system. Because I think really big picture, Karen, when we talk about healing, there's biological healing that's needed, not emotional healing only. And so paying attention to our nervous system, and I know I would argue nervous system regulation is just as much a new fad word as healing.
Yeah,
but it's important, right? And it's relevant, and we have to know. And again, cortisol and stress response, right? So if we can start looking at, hey, in a perfect world, your parents apologize, you have a big hug, but even with the apology, you're still you, and you are still now left with all of your coping mechanisms. So that's why even in my healing work, I have clients that have multiple coaches. I have a client that has 4 coaches: a spiritual coach, a financial coach, and then the wellness coach and the fitness coach. And I always find myself coming back to this speech, because you're like, oh, I'm uncovering this and I'm processing that or whatever. And I'm like, that's wonderful. But at some point, we have to accept that things may or may not go the way we want, and we're still left with us.
Yeah, man. Exactly. Yes.
Right? We're still left with us. And so now it's still our work, whether they acknowledge it or not. And I do wish that everyone has the opportunity to say what they need to say and get it off their chest. I had an opportunity to say it to my dad, and just like you said, it was not the response I was hoping for.
Yeah.
Right? I was just sort of stonewalled, and that was the last time I even spoke to him. He died a year later, and what did that get me? 10 more years of trying to figure that shit out.
Yes.
Right? Because I didn't get the closure. So let's pay attention to how we're affected now. We talked again off camera. The relationship with your kids. Are we snapping? Are we tired? Are we avoidant? And I know, like, I don't want to just have this broad strokes statement, but in this context, yes, all the unhealed stuff from our past, including the dynamic with our parents and older family, is still manifesting in our day-to-day life, in the symptoms that we're struggling with, in sleeping for 8 hours and still waking up feeling exhausted, always being hypervigilant and tiptoeing around people's moods, obsessing about interactions that you would have had, people pleasing, not being able to set boundaries, not being able to advocate for yourself and to articulate your grievances or whatnot, with work, with colleagues, with your boss, with your spouse, with your kids.
Totally. Yeah.
Like all of this is the aftermath.
Yeah.
Of right. So as much as we say, the healing and again the dialogue is important, now we need to, like, when you said, and I felt it was a great way you teed up this session, is what does healing actually look like? And now the research is coming out more and more. It's like, we need to start with our health. And what does health look like? Well, 20 years ago, I would say, Kieran, if you just like lost 20 pounds and got in shape, everything's fixed and you're going to be great. And that's true.
Move more, eat less.
There you go, right? And now it's like, no, you've actually got to rest more. You've got to give yourself more grace. And let me just, it's very important to make the distinction. When we say rest in wellness terms, it's sleep. And when we say sleep, it's not shut your eyes, wake up. Like my 8 hours versus someone else's 8 hours are different. We're talking about
Yes.
quality sleep, which means a wind down routine at night, and like getting off devices and doing something peaceful so that you can actually settle into a good night's rest, and then waking up feeling rested. And then there's sleep, and then there's rest. And this is something where a lot of us are just not really missing the mark on this. It's not just rest where you're just sitting. There's emotional rest, there's sensory rest, there's mental rest, physical rest, of course. There's, I think, 7 types of rest. And we need to actually, based on what's being demanded of us, pay attention to the types of rest we need. Carolyn, my wife, made a joke the other day, and I snapped at her. I'm like, this is why you're so exhausted, because she's been on a journey of healing, and she's a doer. So she's always going.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, I recognize that I need to rest, because when she doesn't rest, she's got a million foot problems, bone spurs, plantar fasciitis, the whole 9. And so she's like, yeah, I need to rest more. And so there was one day where I'm like, hey, people pay me for my advice, so you should probably just give my advice. Right?
I'll give it to you for free. Okay, I'm sure she loved
go
that.
Rest. Yeah, go take a nap, go upstairs and just rest. And she said something that I think is the way a lot of women think, because it was a quiet day and there was not a lot going on. And I'm like, hey, why don't you go rest? And she's like, rest from what? And I said, oh, what do you mean? Like, today is a day where you can rest. And she said, well, I didn't really do much today. And I said, well, that's my point though. You don't have to earn rest. Like, you don't have to be tired first to then justify wanting rest. It can be a quiet day, and you can still say, in fact, you should still say, hey, it's a quiet day today. I'm going to take a nap. I'm just going to go close my eyes. I'm just going to lay out on the couch and pick up that book I've been meaning to read. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this. There's this feeling like I should only rest if I've done something. But if I haven't done anything today, what am I resting for? What are your thoughts? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, you said it so well. Like, I think the first thing is asking ourselves, where does that come from? Because my husband had to tell me years ago, I was doing something without realizing it, which would be like walking up to him. Let's say he's sitting on the couch and I'd be like, okay, Carrie, so I washed this, I did this, I cleaned that, I mopped this, I'm going to do this later, and I'm going to make a list to do that, and blah, 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 blah. So it's okay if I just sit for a bit. Like, I know, I learned that I was asking for permission, and he's like, please, like, do not, like, this puts me in a weird, like, I'm not giving you permission, you do you. And so then I started repeating it just in my head. Okay, I did this. Because exactly like your wife, and probably like many of us, we've watched our moms and our dads and people, whoever raised us, maximize the day to get everything they have to get done. And you remember Tony Robbins, like, you sleep when you're dead kind of mentality. So you're alive, do everything. So we really have to push a lot of that. Like, it's a lot of work to break that, being taught that for many of us. So I'm in that same boat too. And you don't have to earn it, as you said. And so, like you said, so what does healing mean? So it's like these scripts that we've learned from somewhere, and now we're just trying to reword them. And it takes like a very long time to break a habit. I'm coming up to 1 year of not smoking marijuana. And I smoked marijuana in the last little while from morning till bedtime. Like, I can function all day. You wouldn't know. It was like a numbing medication. It was great. I was happy. I was the best. And then I decided to take a year off because I needed to, I think, work through some things to not be smoking all year. And I'm not a big drinker, so marijuana was my vice. And so in not going right back to it, I had to leave friend spaces, like literally stop talking to people. I had to stop going to certain areas in my home. I had to stop listening to certain musics, like all these things that were connected to my habit. And so why am I sharing this? I'm sharing this because just like your story with your wife and this rest, we have these habits that we have formed. Neural pathways have told us this is what we got to do. This is what we do. This is what our brain keeps doing. And so just saying it, or, talking to someone on the phone and saying, yeah, I'm going to do this. It takes a little more effort and sticking through to be able to get to a place where you're napping on the couch or you're doing the thing that you weren't doing before. So it's like a habit, and it takes a solid year to like sometimes break out of the things that all our life we've been doing, which is I'll sleep when I'm dead.
Yeah, I'm really curious because I'm a recreational marijuana user myself.
Yeah.
How has it been for the year? Do you feel like there was a huge difference? Like, I'm curious because my wife and I go back and forth. She's off it completely now. Yeah. I'm still recreational. I'm very minimal.
Yeah.
Because the cold turkey thing, I can go weeks and months without it, but I always sort of come back to it for my own reasons. But I'm curious to hear how it's been for you.
Yeah, thank you. Good question. My whole household probably wanted to kill me in the first few months because I don't think marijuana gets enough credit when it comes to the fact that you can actually be addicted to that. And again, you say what you want, but if you're doing something consistently, whether you want to call it addiction or it becomes a habit, use whatever word, but it's hard to break that. And so I went cold turkey, that was fine. But then what? Then I'm going through a lot of emotional withdrawal. I'm starting to feel emotions that marijuana numbed all day for me. And the main emotion that I stuck to was happiness. I was like very happy. My husband and I looked at me when I was 10 months in, because we both heard a noise that I made that I had not made in so long, which was we were watching a show together and I laughed out loud. And we were both like, oh my God, because it took me that long to start to feel and be okay. And so you go through ebbs and flows, but I noticed my memory was building a lot of, I guess, muscle, because I could remember the car wash 6-digit code without looking at it 20 times. When your phone needs a password or you're ordering groceries and you got to put I could never memorize stuff anymore. So my brain started to feel less foggy. There's lots of things that I notice myself gaining, including the weight, because for the longest time, I didn't eat. So you lose your appetite when you get off weed like that. And so it took me months to build up my appetite. But when I did, I caught up quickly. So then I was like, oh, I'm eating everything. So there's interesting things. I was dreaming again. I stopped dreaming. Like I never dreamt. And then I also learned that I actually don't sleep well. Like when you smoke weed, you don't realize how much you're getting up and all those kinds. So I think it was just building that awareness. So overall, it was good. And I think probably the most important thing was I earned a lot of street cred from my kids. Like my kids were very, very excited and really supported this, and in some ways even asked of it, like, can you take a break? Because I'm very open and I don't hide my weed smoking. Just like alcohol, I'd never hid that. So I didn't why would I hide weed smoking? So I think that's also helped our relationship too, because they probably, I think I should ask them, they probably saw a different me than they see now. I'm probably more present now. Even if I'm on my phone, they probably say that I'd still be more present. You're just there, but you're not. But you also learn why you're filling that gap. So I learned a lot. There's lots of other things. If I had known, I would have thought about it a little bit longer. But I've been writing a journal in the year because I was learning about myself. And probably the other big thing was I put up with very toxic friendships. Because I was always high, I allowed a lot of bullshit to slide, and particularly with my white friends. Those were the only friends I had. And so I learned that the smoking weed allowed me to let a lot go. And I actually was bothered by a lot more than I was letting on. So
interesting.
Yeah. So that was like a really interesting learning
Yeah.
this
And
past year
we
too.
can tie this back into this conversation because with parents, a lot of parents smoke weed.
Yeah.
And we say
Yeah.
it's, I've heard it so many times. Some people drink a glass of wine. This is my
Yeah.
glass of wine kind of thing. And that's
Yeah.
sort of my MO as well. But it's, again, it as you said, it starts off as this thing to sort of like help you just feel a little lifted and feel a little bit
Yeah.
lighter. But underneath that, it's avoidance, right? It is just sort of like, I don't want to deal with this right now. I've got so many things going on. So I'm going to take this because and not just that, I want to feel good for a little bit. Like I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
want to feel good for a little bit. So
Yeah, like there's no harm in going out. I mean, we grew up in the clubbing days, man. There's no harm
yeah,
in going out and getting your drink on if you're, being healthy about it. And obviously, this is like a PSA, figure that shit out, people.
yes,
Do not drive. But it's the same thing with weed. If people feel like everyone's got to decide that for themselves. So there's no guilting anyone that right now that's like, oh shit. For me, if I didn't smoke weed, I wouldn't be functioning in the way that I functioned for so long.
right.
And so that wasn't okay anymore.
Yeah,
That's why it was, for me, it was, I'm not being me. I'm just smoking weed. Sure, if I don't know what I'm going to do after the year, but if I did do it recreationally, I'd have to have a lot of rules around it. It'd be
yeah,
like having a fun weekend where you're going to go hang out with someone and you smoke a J or whatever it is. Like, I have to have a lot of rules because I know there's more benefits for me to not do it. And I love it. That's the
yeah.
problem.
So
Like,
that's why I never
I
stopped.
really love it.
I've stopped and started and stopped, and so I'm aware exactly what you just said. I have a lot of rules around it,
Yeah.
around the usage and even the potency.
Yeah.
So I still dream. I still have dreams because my usage is so low.
Right.
But I don't know if this happens to you sometimes. I'm sorry that we're going on a different tangent here, but we'll bring it back.
Yeah. We promise.
Yeah. Sometimes when I take a break or sometimes when I smoke after, and originally, because I had a business and it was a really stressful job, I felt it was unfair to my children and my wife because like you can't always not bring work home.
Yeah.
And so I would have a hard time just checking out completely and just letting it go. And so when I smoked, it allowed me to just sort of move past that.
Yeah.
And I would come back in and I'm like, okay, I'm good. And I'm loving that. I'm happy.
Exactly.
I want to spend
Yeah.
time with my kids. I want to hear about their day. But before that, I just couldn't.
Yeah.
And now, but weed was the catalyst. I don't want to say that it was a catalyst, but it was there that actually sparked my healing journey. And all the closure I got with my dad and everything was under the influence. So I looked at this as this really powerful healing tool. But of course, and I'm sure there's a tipping point.
Yeah.
Where it begins to lose its intended purpose. And then you're just doing it to do it because it's a habit that you formed.
Yeah.
And so you go to the stopping phase of it. But there are times now that when I do smoke, I'm like, this is why I do it, because I still get insights and I still get ideas and creativity, or I can resolve something. So I agree. Like, again, to each his own. Like,
yeah, and it's not a comparison to alcohol, because I think alcohol is a poison on a different level. Like my therapist, when I was getting around to like stopping, I remember her saying, obviously I'm not prescribing, and this isn't like, I'm not telling you should or shouldn't, but from my perspective, it's sometimes helpful when because I was working through a lot of racial trauma. Like I left a lot of relationships because I learned all of a sudden, like, holy shit, a lot of things at once. The floodgates open. And so she's like, it does seem to help chill you out because you're not able to regulate. And that's what it was doing. And I was like, but my it's just like coffee. Like, if I got to get up and if I can't function until I have a cup of coffee, I don't know. For me, that worries me. It's like I should be able to function to some degree. Like, coffee for me should be something I enjoy drinking, not if I don't have it, get away, kids, I'm going to ruin your day. And that is what weed was beginning to be. When I first quit, my husband was like, you don't have to do this, you're brave. You're so brave. And one day we'll write a book about you. But you don't have to do this. You can smoke, because my mood swings were when you're numbed for so long. Your mood swings, your nervous system, all these parts of you were like, oh shit, we got to figure this stuff out like on our own. And it was impacting everyone. And my son and I, we always celebrate every month together as a family. But my kid said to me, he's like, you made it this far and you've been able to regulate, you've been able to do all this. Don't forget that when your year is up, you don't need it like the way that you thought you did. And I was like, damn, you're so cool. Thank you for saying that, because you're right.
Not to mention pressure that your kids are so emotionally intelligent.
I know, right? Hey, right? That's a pat on our backs if we've done something good in this parenting journey.
Further to that though, you mentioned needing to regulate, and a lot of parents are using weed to regulate.
Yeah.
And I would be remiss if I didn't say, as a fitness professional originally, is fitness. Like, fitness is a powerful healing regulation tool. Mm-hmm. When we talk about pent up emotions and feelings held in, I can't tell you how many times I've done yoga classes and seen people do yoga classes, and certain poses will have them just having a full on meltdown because your emotions are stored in the body. Yeah. And so, I think what we're talking about, a big picture, is we're all doing or taking something to cope and to regulate in a small way, in whatever small ways we can. But if we are, and I really commend you on going a year without it, because that shows your commitment to doing it the right way and not relying on the band-aid solutions. And sure, maybe there'll come a time where you find a healthy balance with or without it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take away the fact that we're never going to feel whole if we don't commit to ripping the covers off and opening getting those skeletons out and addressing it and dealing with it. But I think, and this was an awesome conversation, because it's reaffirming that this encounter that we might be imagining with our parents, or this apology that we're hoping is sort of going to help us crack open and be a catalyst for healing.
Yeah,
we can't depend on that, right? And it's often not going to be the thing that's going to just be this neat bow in a relationship and then you can move forward, because we're still, again, dealing with all of the conditioned behaviors and programming that we now have. And really, that's the real work.
Yes.
The icing on top would be an acknowledgement or an apology. But the real work is, how do we heal ourselves with the resources, with the knowledge, with the internet, with the podcasts and the self-help books and whatnot. And, I'm glad we spoke about healing can look different to different people and in different settings. It might not be a dialogue. It might not be a therapy session. It might be agreeing to just sit and share a meal together, or go out together, or go for a walk together, or do a project together, or something.
Or take the nap, like you said. Rest is resistance, right?
Take the nap, go for the walk,
take
the yoga class, listen to the meditation. Because real healing is, just like how trauma is not your fault, any bad thing is not your fault, what happened to you is not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Exactly.
Now do the work and say, okay, this is where I am, what do I need to do? And that is the real work. So, for our West Indian community, the BIPOC community, everyone, that, we need to be here, that everything happened. And there's a really, really cool quote from Mitch Albom. He wrote Tuesdays with
Morrie. Yeah.
One of my all-time favorite books.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's that book. He was talking about parenting as one of his other books. And he was saying that in parenting, your child is like glass. You will either smudge them, you will scratch them, you will crack them, or you might completely shatter them. Either way, you are going to leave an imprint on them. So no one gets a pass. Mm-hmm. And even for me, you and I could be patting each other on the back, saying, hey, we're great parents. And then 10 years from now, our kids are in therapy talking about some shit that we did, that we were just oh my God, I can see that. So from that perspective, and again, I'm saying this, there are parents who just missed the mark. They meant well, but missed the mark. And then there are parents who are cruel and absolutely destroy their children's self-esteem. And yes, in certain circumstances, cutting off contact is the appropriate thing to do. But we're
Yeah,
not
it's just
talking
about
about
safety at that point. Yeah.
exactly. But for the rest of us, we can at least give them that grace and accept that they didn't have the tools like we talked about, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have the language. And so it's we can't expect to get that type of validation and acknowledgement all the time. And if you do, if you're lucky enough to get it, great. But the real work is with ourselves.
Totally.
The real work with our nervous system, healing, doing the work, doing the meditation, eating a healthy diet, being mindful of the substances we take.
Yeah.
And just being honest with ourselves.
And I love that. And if I can add, if we try to move through the world with some level of awareness, it's recognizing our patterns. Everything happens in patterns. You look at it on a global level, you're seeing patterns. It's the same with us as individuals. And if we are even more blessed and we have siblings or a relationship with siblings, I think sometimes that also helps us recognize patterns, because whether you're an only child or you're the oldest, youngest, middle, wherever you fall, and should you have this relationship, even if you don't have a relationship with them, that's also very telling of these trenches that maybe you grew up in, and that there's some work that needs to happen for you as a person. But I found having a connection with my siblings has helped me a lot along the way, recognizing my own patterns. Because yeah, you're not healed. It's just recognizing these things set me off. These things are hard for me. And then when I'm in a situation like that, I can better manage myself. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be perfect when I face my abuser or whoever that is. It just means that I can regulate, I can breathe, I can stay still, I can do what it is that I need for myself and not go into a traumatic state again. And we do all those in different levels. And I think sometimes having siblings is like having movement in your life. It provides some kind of regulation and closure for each other. I'm the oldest, and my sister's the middle child. My brother is quite a bit younger. And he's shared really great, brave things with my sister and I too, about you guys kind of left at one point and I was way younger than you and I was by myself and I had to you guys did all these things for me and then I had to figure all this shit out. And you go back and you're like, oh yeah, I was working a different path in my life. I didn't even think about that. Yep. So can we patch that? Can we work through that? And then it helps me understand. Sometimes you forget, I think, because so much happens as you're growing up as a child, like, oh, wait, this is why these things happen. And it's not just me that it impacted these other people in the home. And so I try to help my kids have that connection too. You can hate each other, but you gotta also love each other, because you're gonna need each other at some point when you hate your father and I. You two will need to, therapy will do its thing, but you guys can. And again, I get that not everybody has access to that or whatnot. But if it's for those that do, your siblings can be a really good tool to recognize, because they'll know some patterns that, like I said, I didn't recognize, and my sister was
and even provide context and details that you may have been missing. And
totally,
my sister, I'll have an experience and share a memory, and my sisters are quite older than me. They're like, no, that it didn't happen that way, or that wasn't exactly it, and you don't know what happened there. I'm like, oh, okay, so yeah, it's a blessing to have a sibling. For this,
it's so funny. You're the youngest, and my brother's the youngest, and you have two older sisters.
I have an older brother and two older sisters.
Okay, as well. Yeah. And you guys are both named Kam with a K too, so it's so funny.
Really?
Yeah, this is why I think I connected when I first reached out to you after watching one of your videos. I was like, Kam, you're so kind. And you reminded me of my Kam as well, so it was cute. As I think we probably could be saying a lot more. We asked each other, you want to go back, you want to add to?
I think mainly, and I think we talked about it, but I think we should all remember at this point in time that it is a privilege to be the cycle breaker. Like I always pose this challenge to some of my clients when we're talking about healing and the difficulty of forgiveness and acceptance and moving on. I ask, would you trade lives with your parents? Would you trade lives with your grandparents? Would you trade lives to live in any different time? And I don't think a single person has answered yes yet. Because if you put it that way, with all the resources we have, with the technology we have, with the tools, with what we know about healing and health, and all the luxuries and conveniences we have that
Yeah.
even our parents didn't have like less than 20 years ago.
Right.
So if we can acknowledge that we wouldn't trade our time and our position here, then we have to also acknowledge that it is a privilege to have the self-awareness and the emotional intelligence to be a cycle breaker. And that just like any great parent, you don't get the recognition until probably when you're dead. Or when you're right. You
Yeah,
don't get the
man. If
credit.
only you can be at your own funeral, right? The
Right.
things people say about you then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so yes, we're validating the pain that was dismissed and we're naming the harm that was invisible. And yes, your pain is important to you, and it is important that whoever hurt you hear it. But outside of that, we are living in a time now where, for the most part, mental health now is destigmatized. And we couldn't say that maybe 25 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we have access to therapy and the books and the podcasts, and we can articulate ourselves in a way that our parents couldn't. And then, as we shared off screen, we're rewriting what it is to have great relationships with our kids.
Yeah.
Right? And this is brand new territory for us now. Like, we don't, because a lot of us couldn't say that we had great relationship with our parents. Now we're going on vacation with our kids, or we're playing sports with our kids. And more importantly, again, it's a privilege even here to be in friendships and environments where healing is possible.
Yeah, for sure.
I think like it's a great time to be alive, and our parents didn't have this. Our grandparents couldn't even conceive of this. So the work is hard, but we wouldn't trade it. And I think that that's something that we need to remember when it gets messy. Is that we're in a privileged position.
Yeah.
And we should remember that.
Yeah, I mean, and if we don't remember it, I'm sure our parents will remind us. So, we're good that way. But no, well said. I agree. I think it's a tricky place to be. And again, it's just like reiterating, good and bad and ugly can all happen in our stories. And so if you feel that bad and ugly are tying you down and impacting your own relationships, then it's definitely worth doing some work. And if you can't do that work with the people who were part of causing that harm, as you're saying, do it yourself. It's worth it. Like, so many people in our community are having short-lived relationships, marriages. They fantasize wanting to be as a couple together. They get together, and then you're like kind of sitting across the room and you're like, what? Why is this not working? And I think a lot of it has to do with, you're not maybe taught in your homes how to be in a relationship and all that. But also it's like showing up one day and not realizing, oh shit, I also have so much work myself to do too. And it's a deal maker or breaker in our relationships and even in our jobs. If we value our jobs or careers or studies, all that, these things pop up. So it's worth paying attention to what irks me and how do I hold myself accountable versus, well, these people didn't do this right, or they didn't give me that or whatnot. That's true. Absolutely. But then what? Where do we go from there? And like you said, it's hard work, right? Like we can't just sit in a friend's brunch and keep using the words of healing and whatnot if we're truly not going to crack ourselves open and figure that out, right? Like why did I need weed for that many years? What was that about? Why was I having those mood swings? Why is it that, sometimes my temper goes off? Like, I'm just outing myself to you guys because I know from where I'm sitting, I have so much work that I can be doing myself that putting it on others is like, I don't have time for that because I can be doing that myself. So my friend, give me a middle fingers up today. What are we going to do?
I get every time. This is the second time doing it, and I've been thinking for like 48 hours about what I would say. But this time I would like to say middle fingers up to waiting for people to change and situations to change and parents to change, and recognizing the privilege we had that we just talked about, and recognizing, as you said, and I think this has been a theme of our entire conversation, that two things can be true.
Yes.
Right? Yes, we recognize the victimhood, that we were hurt, but we also have recognized the agency that we have to to take our healing in our charge. We don't have to wait. We don't have to wait for anyone to acknowledge our pain or to recognize us or to validate us.
Yeah.
It's in our hands right now. So middle fingers up to waiting for others to give us permission to heal.
Ooh, well said. If people want to get in touch with you and maybe people are just meeting you for the first time, they're probably going to go back and listen to episode 136. But where can they get in touch with you?
Yes, I'm on Instagram at Kam Bassier, Kambassier. Same handle on TikTok, same handle on YouTube. And that's where I am. I have my information in my bio if anyone wanted to email me and reach out about having a conversation or having any questions about what we spoke about. But I'm making content specifically for Instagram and TikTok and YouTube.
Any last words, my friend? If people were going to take one thing and only one thing from our conversation today, what do you really hope they take?
I think what we just touched on, which is, I'm assuming whoever's listening to this right now, we're in our 40s and mid 40s and 50s, and we're coming. You know, there's a phrase, there's a philosophical phrase where they say, a man lives two lives. The second one begins when he realizes he only has one.
Ooh, okay.
I really believe in the work that I'm doing, and I have tons of conversations every week, that this is where we are right now. I think this entire session that we've had is really validating this idea that we're recognizing that we only have one life.
Yeah.
And not that time is running out, but we're approaching the halfway mark, and our destiny is in our own hands. And our healing, as you said it so eloquently, it's not just sitting down and talking about the pain, but becoming agents of our own healing and doing the actual work. And actual work means choosing to get up every day and live your life a different way, being intentional about the actions and the decisions that you make. And it is uncomfortable. Just like, thank you for sharing about your experience with marijuana. It's not something conceptual, but it is work. You've chosen to deal with the discomfort and the awkwardness and the mood swings, and that is taking charge of your healing.
Yeah.
And so if I can just put one phrase out there, is that if it feels uncomfortable, you're probably doing the right thing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. I think you and I talked about this prior. We'll probably have a part 3 as we're organically in these conversations inside out. So I appreciate getting to meet you. I appreciate the work you put out there and how vulnerable you get out there. When I first met you, this is one of the things I said, and I'll say it again. It's like really good for the brown men of our community to also have someone that they can connect with and learn from, because a lot of our dudes really are in this position of not knowing where to go, how to go, and lots of health risks are happening. Not to say the women not, but I for you being a brown man, getting out there and sharing this, I think this is really good because it cultivates the good and right thing for our community and for not just men, for everyone, but definitely for the dudes out there as well. So I hope people are going to start following you if they're just meeting you today. And for others, we always say these conversations are door openers. We're just having them. We're just learning how to break these patterns. So if you have feedback, if you have something that didn't sit right with you, please share with us. You know where to reach Kam now. You always know where to reach me. We want the feedback. Otherwise, we'll take the silence as, oh, we got to have more of these conversations. So
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Karen. This was fun.